Hello, everyone, and welcome once again down to hell. And appropriately enough, joining Steph and I this evening, 3 nights before Halloween. Absolutely delighted to welcome aboard Mr. Steve Gonsalves. Steve, hello.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you. This is exciting.
And you and Steph have met before.
That's right. Yeah, a few times. I think.
Do you remember the first time?
Do you remember the first time?
It may have been in Florida, maybe Spooky Empire,
No,
perhaps. No.
no. You were on a professional engagement.
Yep.
Oh.
In 2008.
Okay.
In July, I think, at Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
Oh,
My friend
goodness.
and I did the ghost hunt with the ghost hunters.
Okay.
So
I remember doing that there.
And
that
then
was cool. That was the first time
you
I was
hung out
there.
together afterwards, didn't you? You said?
No, not with Steve.
No, not with Steve.
But that was the first time I was ever at Trans-Allegheny, and it's probably like my favorite place ever.
It's pretty intense over there.
Been there many times since, and we actually sort of befriended the Jordans,
John
Rebecca and John, and
sure.
So we just kind of say, hey, we kind of want to can we come over and play, sort of thing, and we get to go and walk around.
I don't think we've ever been there without some weird shit
happening.
Going on.
Yes, yeah.
We've told the main story before, so I won't retell that one. But I mean, I wouldn't say we've seen a ghost. I don't think I've ever seen a ghost. But very, very, very clear auditory things happening that both Steph and I heard. Including one where we were at one end of corridor and down at the other end of the corridor. And there was only Steph and I and one member of staff in the building. We knew that to be the case, no doubt about that. Just
Yes, whistling.
And not the wind. It wasn't an owl. It was unmistakably, I would say, a man whistling. Just one note, brief, and it stopped.
And that was after a bit of a kerfuffle in the violent men's waiting area, visiting area.
At the end of the violent men's ward.
Do you remember having any experiences there?
I don't remember any what we call first-hand experiences where I saw anything, but I do remember a few audio recordings that we got there. One was in that theater setup that's there. It was where they would have some performances.
Yeah. Dances and things like that.
Exactly. But if anywhere is haunted, it does seem to be those places where you have traumatic events or very loving events. But that story there where the two patients, they're both, it's not just the criminally or the insane. There you have the criminally insane, which is quite a combination there. But that one story where the one guy just stuck his bedmate's or bunkmate's head under the post and then jumped on the bed until his eyes popped out and his head crushed, and then kept eating his food until the guards came in.
Yeah.
Like that. That's
Steve,
terrifying.
That's exactly the story that we were discussing, Steph and I, and I think his name was Chaz, when we were sitting in the waiting room on the violent men's ward. And the guy who had done that, who had pushed the leg of the bed, was, even as we were discussing it, he was in the new mental health hospital facility that they'd opened when they closed down Trans-Allegheny. He was still alive and presumably fast asleep, not too far away from where we were discussing his nefarious deed. And that was the point at which, I mean, we were using, I don't know whether you put any faith in those things, the iPhone apps the ghost radar thing that speaks and has the little blobs.
They're a lot
Sure.
of fun,
And
if nothing else.
I said to Chaz, well, for what it's worth, there appear to be 3 of them standing behind you right now. And we had been getting words coming through. It was saying things like fight, flight, fall,
chase.
And at the moment I said that to Chaz, I heard a noise that I describe as being like the noise that pigeons' wings make when they take off, that slightly fluting, fluttering noise. That point, Steph, who was standing to my right, screamed and jumped right across me because she heard.
So it wasn't like a scream. It was more of a.
No, it was a scream.
Was it a scream? I'm not really a screamer.
It was perfectly understandable. Perfectly understandable. Steph was standing next to what was like metal grating, and she said she heard a noise like someone had run a piece of stiff cardboard up and down that grating. Like,
yeah, I sort of felt
that noise.
Felt the air of it.
And then once we'd all calmed down and described what we'd heard, that was when we heard the whistle from the other end of the corridor. Steph and I decided maybe we should go and check out our hotel room at this point. It was about half past 2 in the morning.
Yeah, I think it was later than that actually. But
wow, that's cool. I mean, you always try to think of, what was that, what would be happening in that building when it was a working environment.
Well, and I mean, everything you say about it is true, but it, of course, it also had a lot of people who were not in any way, shape, or form insane or even close to it. People who were perfectly sane who found themselves trapped in there, because you could take your wife along and dump her off, and make an.
You just had to bring a friend with you, and he could say, she's insane.
Start staring mad, and they would pay you
$50, right?
To take her to take her off your hands. And then you could, go and enjoy the younger model that you were presumably trading her in for. So it's an extraordinary mixture, and it's a heavy building to go around even in daylight.
Yeah, it's I've read across a lot of those documents, and they have listings of, depending on how far back in time you go, what you can be committed for.
Yeah.
And it's even things like for being bad company, for all these weird things. One was for tripping while walking. It was a very bizarre list of things you could get committed for. And you're right, you could just drop people.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
Say, this guy was terrible to hang out with the other day. Like, get him in here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really miserable. Okay, we'll have him. Yeah. Here's $50.
What do you think what is the most active place you've been in where you knew without a doubt there was no sort of trickery or questionable things going on? Like your most profound experience, I guess.
Sure. My most profound experience, might not necessarily be the place I think is the most active. For instance, my most profound experiences are when things sort of move. Just recently we had a door sort of slam shut on us, and then we went to grab it again, sort of flung open and jammed us a bit. That sort of stuff is really awesome to experience, especially because it's very hard to explain that. There's some sort of physical movement right there in the environment. But the place I say is the most haunted, and this is based on frequency of activity and overall experience while you're at the place. I'd say always goes back to Waverly Hills and Louisville.
Yeah, we've been there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just about every time I've been there, which is somewhere between maybe 10 and 15 times, there's always a laundry list of experiences, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming in terms of the experiences. You shouldn't stare out into a dark hallway for more than a few minutes at a time, because you will start to see things
Yeah,
just
I think
naturally.
that's what happened to us when we were
Sure,
there.
sure.
you know, and
I've only been there once, but I I I felt it. I felt it was seemed like a good place. I mean, it was a place of healing. It wasn't a place of incarceration, through no fault of your own. It was. I think it was only tuberculosis, wasn't it?
I'm not sure. I think it
Patients, I
was
think.
mainly a place of
I
healing.
didn't have
Yeah.
any feelings of anything there at all. But every time you've been there, you've had something going on.
yeah, I would. I'm not sure. I would say every single time, but the majority, yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, but a lot of things can play into that. And you're right. It most certainly is, and was a place primarily of healing. But there are some stories there, that are pretty grim. With the body shoot, the death tunnel there, where 60,000 people die in just a relatively short time. Uh, but who knows if their interpretation of time and space is the same as ours? What is linear here? I went there here and I didn't, and I went there this time, but I was there. We don't know what their interpretation of time and space is. It could be what is a year here. It could be a moment over there, or even the opposite, or maybe it is linear here. I don't think anybody knows
Now
really.
you immediately use the words they, um, and you talk about over there. So you have no doubt that this is communication with the spirits of the dead, and that they are existing in in some other place that you're calling over there.
Yeah, I'm I
Because I'm
do
not
believe.
sure I do, but
Yeah, it's and that's either belief is completely fine. You'll either we're all going to get to ultimately the same place regardless. Whether there is or there isn't, we're all going to end up there,
not there. Yes.
or not there exactly. But I have experienced things and recorded things and heard things, and I've even seen things that do make me believe there is something else. Now, interestingly, recently I've looked into the possibility that maybe it might not be, you know, tangible, people who were dead, excuse me, alive and now dead. Perhaps it's more a time, a type of a slip, or interdimensional in some sort of way. I had a very cool experience where I got to sit down and sort of interview, well, definitely interview a group of physicists who, although most of them most certainly didn't believe in the paranormal, they all believed in other dimensions, which I thought quite interesting. And they said uh, that the next wave of science is going to be interdimensional, and they think that there's a good chance that it may just be sound waves and light waves, but that there is certainly other dimensions besides here, which is quite fascinating. But if I had to say, if there is a gun to my head and I had to make the decision, I would say I do believe there is something after this, something that we are communicating with. Um, I do. I've never seen a ghost like, much like yourself, but
Right.
uh, things I can't
And
explain are
you've
definitely
had
happening.
you've had plenty of opportunity, God knows.
Yeah,
Because I mean, it would be fair to call you a veteran ghost hunter. What Ghost Hunter started in 2004, I
I
think.
did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, was TAPS already in existence prior to the start of the show? That's if I'm remembering correctly, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. Have I got that right?
That's exactly
Right.
it. Yeah. Yep.
Presumably
Wow.
that was already in existence, which was you and Jason and Tango, and or did you come together for the show?
Yeah. Well, I actually met Jay in, I want to say 1995, probably.
Hmm.
And we would actually talk on the phone and send emails back and forth about just things in New England and mostly paranormal and haunted places. And eventually his team then was called Rhode Island Paranormal, Rick. And we started working together and going on cases together. And then Grant joined the team, and uh, Grant was a webmaster and said, "Hey, you need to do some revamping here." And then it became the Atlantic Paranormal Society. That was probably I don't remember exactly, most likely mid to late 90s. So we were a team for quite some time.
10 years
Um,
before the show.
yeah,
Oh,
and then in 2006, we met Tango. We helped him out on a case, and then he came along on a few of ours with us.
right. Cool. Was Ghost Hunters the first of
Yeah,
the ghost
there,
hunting TV shows?
there were shows that had investigators on it in little clips, like
Right,
shows. There were some called sightings, encounters, and
right.
you could see a quick glimpse of a paranormal team. But we were the first show where they followed a group of investigators. When they first approached us, we said no. Honestly, for a few times, because we said nobody wants anybody to know their house is haunted. They're looked at like,
Oh,
so we can't bring you anywhere. This will never work. Um, and so we just didn't understand how television would work. So a few years went by when we just said no to that. And then eventually, there was one company, Pilgrim Film, said, "Well, we know you guys are the ones who do it. We like how you do it." And they were really kind of blown away on, how nobody knew that this was done, really. And but then he agreed to say, it is what it is. The ghosts can come and go, and you just have to go along for the ride. And he said, well, they said, we'll just document you guys and follow you, and not, meddle with anything you do. And we liked that, and eventually agreed to do it. But yeah, that's how that sort of came about.
Mm.
and has that always been the case of the producers and the director always left you alone and never tried to beef things up a bit or egg things along a bit? Because a lot of it, I mean, we've done a tiny amount of it, to infinitesimally small amount compared to what you've done, but enough to know that a lot of it is wandering around or sitting around at stupid o'clock, you know,
Mhm.
with absolutely nothing happening,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing going on, and that's most of the time, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing we contemplated. Quite honestly, I remember having that exact conversation with Jason and saying, we've been sitting around on a couch, for 5 hours. How is this going to be a TV show? Because
Yeah.
honestly, you're just sitting there listening. You're doing things and using different techniques, but there's a long time of boring silence. Quite
Yes.
honestly. But we were, in the beginning, trying to pick cases that had a high frequency of activity. We're trying to tip the scales in our favor, that sort of thing. But television is, there are things that, for instance, there are camera operators who have to film what we do, and
Yeah.
so if you're just running around doing your own thing and you're not, they're just not gonna, it's gonna be chaos. So they may say, or say, oh, hey, now would you mind, going over to the van and discussing what you just learned?
Yeah.
So they may put pocket it for you, so it's not just chaos. And they may remind you of things, like they'll let us get through a whole, discussion or a whole thing what we're doing, and they may say, hey, you forgot to bring up the fact that you learned so and so was killed in the basement. Would you maybe want to bring that up here? So there are
You have to
um
redo that bit of conversation to
Mm.
put that in.
right. So
Sure.
the TV world is there in that regard, but it's all to help us, quite honestly. But when it
Yeah.
comes to the investigation, Once we go, they just, that's it. It's ours. And one thing I like about, and this didn't happen quite honestly until we started working with a Travel Channel and Discovery Channel, is that the investigation can realistically take as long as it needs. In the real world, it takes 4 months to 2 years. That's the average case length. But Discovery Channel and travel has always been like, oh, you need another week, okay, we'll figure it out, and they'll rearrange the next few months of scheduling to make sure we can have an extra week at a place to help the people we're dealing with. And that's actually quite gracious, because you both are familiar with the world of scheduling a TV show or anything like that, and it's quite labor. It's nothing I would want to tackle, honestly. So it's very cool that they'll do that to make sure that we can do the investigation the way that we to the best that we can.
Did you ever catch anyone blatantly trying to screw with you for the sake of just being on the show? I'm sure that's happened.
That's happened, yeah, for sure. In the early days, before TV, we had people that would, there was one story where they had somebody hid a speaker in a wall to make sounds, and it was actually Grant, I believe, or somebody, like, poked a hole through the through the drywall and pulled the wire out, and he's like, what are you doing here? But in terms of on the TV show, there have been a few circumstances where one was the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, which is a super cool place. Go just to go, and maybe it is haunted, but we did find that somebody there, who knows who, tampered with some of our evidence, I guess you'd say.
Really?
And that was pretty disheartening. I
And
remember.
do you confront them, and do you go through with it, or do you stop what you're doing, stop your investigation? What happens in that case?
Yeah, we all of the above, honestly, depending on how bad it is, but we've never actually stopped an investigation over it, because you never know. They may just be trying to, like, just because that happened at the Queen Mary doesn't mean that the Queen Mary isn't haunted.
Right, because everything I hear, it's one of the most haunted places there.
Right. Yep. Moss Beach Distillery, also in California, that they tried to do some. Yeah. But there have been a few, yeah, for sure. They've tried to just, but we've turned down a few. There was a place in St. Augustine, Florida, that a few people have done, and even on television, where they told us that if we were to do it, we had to say it was haunted. And we were already in St. Augustine, and so we said no. We investigated the lighthouse, which was awesome. But we weren't supposed to when we went there. We were supposed to investigate a different place, but we said we're not doing it. The production company understood, said okay. But it was all the people in the town, all the locals, telling us, what are you guys doing in town? You need to go to the lighthouse. You need to go to the lighthouse. And so we made it happen. And in the stead of the place we were supposed to investigate, we actually investigated the lighthouse, which turned out to be super awesome.
All right. I wanted to circle back on the notion of exactly what is being experienced, and I describe myself as a very, 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 very open-minded skeptic. I am skeptical about the whole thing, but I'm very open-minded, and as I said, I've had very real experiences at Trans-Allegheny, at Mansfield. Not at Waverly Hills, but at Rolling Hills.
Rolling Hills.
Oh, I love Rolling Hills.
Yeah.
Very definitely there as well.
And unexplainable.
I'll tell a quick story that because it kind of underlies my feeling about the whole thing. Steph's heard the story before, so I apologize to her, but it's mid-80s, actually shortly before Hellraiser came into my life. And I was working as an actor doing provincial repertory theatre around the country. I was in Leicester in England. And, actors get together to entertain themselves in the evening when we're not performing. And so we gathered at somebody's digs. dinner had been cooked. We'd eaten dinner. Wine had been taken. So what are we going to do now? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a seance. So we did. We didn't have a Ouija board, so we set it up on the table with the pieces of paper with letters and numbers and hello, goodbye, and yes, no, and all of that there, and an upside down wine glass. And we always had one person sitting outside making notes.
Mm-hmm.
And off we went. And as always happens, pretty quickly the wine glass starts moving. And we didn't really have anything for a while. And then we got gobbledygook. And then we got, of course, the Indian spirit guide. What an Indian was doing in Leicester, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, we did. But we still weren't really getting anywhere, and we said, okay, we'll go around the circle, and each person ask, is there anybody here who wants to talk to me? And if all the answers are no, then we'll call it a day. And round we went. And no. We came to one guy who was a dancer primarily and an actor, Welsh guy. Lovely guy, rather nervous energy about him always. Emphatically, yes, somebody there wanted to talk to him. And away we went. This wine glass was racing around the table. So we had at times like only 2 fingers just barely touching it. I swear we could have had no fingers on it and it still would have been traveling so fast. There was like a little nick in the tabletop and the glass was almost falling over it. It was traveling so fast getting there. We chatted to a whole array of his dead relatives, including a long conversation with his dead father, which was quite moving for him because his father had not been dead all that long and they'd had a very, very close relationship. So that was kind of difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Then his grandmother appeared. And this was a bit of a problem because as far as he knew, Granny was alive and well. She lived in a remote farmhouse in Wales. She kept telling the same story over and over again, that she'd gone to an outhouse to get wood for the fire and she dislodged a log and the log pile had fallen and hit her. She had fallen and she was lying on the floor in the outhouse, dead and cold and wet. She kept saying, I'm cold and I'm wet. And this was obviously pretty traumatizing for him. We eventually wound it down, called it a night. Just as a cap to it, he told us the next day that when he was lying in bed, when he got home thinking about it, a picture fell off the wall. And he didn't really know what to do because he didn't feel like he could call his mom and say, I think you should go and visit Grandma. Just see how she is. Because he didn't want to call her and say, the Ouija board says, Granny.
Yeah, I don't know if that's.
So he just kind of waited, and eventually we discovered that Grandma was alive and well. And she had not even so much as slipped and fallen in the outhouse. And I've never forgotten that because it was very intense and it was very real. Right. But what I had to conclude out of it was that we were collectively engaging in a conversation between him and himself, between him and his unconscious mind. We weren't talking to any dead people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was very cogent and rapid and like talking to people. But we weren't. I think we were talking, he was talking to his own unconscious mind. And I always have that in the back of my own mind. I guess like quantum mechanics says that the investigator is always part of the investigation. The experimenter is always part of the experiment. To what extent, when you're sitting in an old dark house in a very atmospheric room at, hours of the night when we're not normally awake, what point do we begin to interact and create the things we came to find? Is that anything you ever think about or worry about, or not worry about, but see as an element in the process?
Yeah, that's actually a super cool story, but an awesome question. And it is something that we've talked about quite a bit, and I do think about. And uh, Dr. William G. Roll, actually, and you can see there's actually this whole lecture is on YouTube. But Dr. William G. Roll talks about a phenomena called audiophonic and telephonic sounds, where when you're in environments of heightened magnetic fields, or where the magnetic field is heightened electrically, which isn't a paranormal thing, that's a real world, scenario, that the synapses in your brain also are, and you will hear things and see things that
They refer to that
you
as
know
a like a fear cage or something like that, right?
the,
The
it could
wiring.
be something similar, yeah. Yep. I have heard that, but that is something that they say can happen. And also, sensory deprivation is known to cause hallucinations. And the American government still to this day uses that as a torture. It's harmless in the long run, so they feel okay about it. But realistically, people go into deprivation chambers as a health, ritual, and not ritual in that sense, but just a routine, I should say, excuse me. And they have hallucinations. People who are sleep deprived, like long distance runners who want to win, and they literally don't sleep, and they'll run for 24, 48 hours straight. They'll start hallucinating. There's one famous story where a runner saw a rabbit, telling her, "You're almost there. Keep going, keep going." And that rabbit handed her a cup of water, and,
Oh,
and then but she was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. So all that is
Wow.
yes.
possible. You do need to take it in little chunks, to make sure you're not overwhelming yourself. I wouldn't sit in one place for hours on end, but and I think that's another reason that you want to look for patterns. Whenever we have an experience, if it's not so, because some things happen where it just happens and you don't need it to happen again because you see it and it's awesome, and you really start to freak out in a great way. But when it is something where you're unsure, you need to see a pattern, get it to happen two or three times, which I've been told by scientists is one of the reasons science won't look at this as a real study, is because there is zero repeatability. There's no way to study it. You can't measure it. So they are a little afraid of it in that regard. But that's
a curious thing, because you can't repeat precisely the same piece of evidence, so that if you're sitting in a room somewhere and something falls over, or there's a noise, or you hear a voice, you can't repeat that, but similar evidence to that is being repeated over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And what you were saying before about, staring off into a dark hallway, and I remember when we went to Waverly, and we didn't really experience anything, but I remember very clearly that moment of us standing in the hallway, and I was doing exactly that, and I had done it. I was doing it for so long that I started
Shadow
to
figures
see
is that big thing,
some sort of, which freaked me out. Yes. I mean, my eyes start watering. We start talking about shadow people, but I felt like I started to see it like a black mass, sort of, in the hallway, sort of, warbling around. And then the time it
but I think
but it was, I know it wasn't really there. It was me, and it was my head starting to.
We're
wired
to see shapes.
Oh yeah, I see shapes and everything.
Recognize things.
But Trans-Allegheny, I remember sitting in, what they refer to as Lily's room.
Sure.
I don't know if I put much stock into that whole thing of, the I think I'm more skeptical than you a lot of the times. they have all the toys in there for the little girl that was apparently born of a patient in the hospital. But
Yeah.
I was sitting in that room with the door closed, me and a friend of mine, and I did my back up against the wall, and it was so quiet that it started to mess with my head, and I just completely freaked out, and I jumped out and ran out of the room. And it was just, because just your head does it to you,
The thing,
Yeah.
the thing I've observed with Lily's room which is that they always tell you that Lily doesn't like men. She likes women, and women who are in that room or in that area have often reported feeling a small hand being placed inside their hands. And I've sat probably 3 or 4 times in Lily's room and sat. We do the flashlight thing, which
I
Steph's
totally,
having nothing to do with.
yeah, I do. It gets fun.
but-
It's funny when it's
Well,
coincidental, and
I agree with everything you say, except it seems to work.
yeah, I don't know.
And I've sat there and asked questions and asked questions and asked questions. Nothing. And on each occasion I've been in there, I finally said, Lily, would you like me to leave? On comes the flashlight every single time.
But what about all the times the flashlight came on before when you were doing nothing or in the middle of speaking or
No, but
something? See that?
I've never had any response from anything in that. I mean, unlike in the nurses' quarter
That was
and
weird.
the Civil War
That was weird.
area, where we've had a whole bunch of stuff.
And see, things
going on all
like
the
that,
time.
like the silly ghost app on the phone is ridiculous. And there's, of course it's not real, but
Do you think that is all
but I
bunk?
don't know. It's like some of the times we've used it, it was weird. It was very strange.
In the nurses' quarter at Allegheny, we're chatting away. I'm speaking, and it's the ghost radar thing that speaks words, and it said
it was like English.
And we were in the process of switching from one app to a different one, and we registered that.
And then it was like
that
British.
App, came up the other one. It said
British.
London.
Didn't it say British?
I remember it saying London as soon as the app came on.
So two different apps were saying things regarding his accent, and it was only giving us women's names.
There, and in the Civil War area, only men's
names. It was very strange. And that was when we were in the nurses' apartments. It said something about money. It said dollar.
Well,
remember that? No, listen, that was fucking weird.
It was, but it's very easy to debunk.
I don't think so. I don't think so. See, we're so back and forth. Like there's shit that he will not buy into for anything, and the same with me.
Well, it was Steph and I, and
we had 2 guides with us at night.
Well, it was
no one else in the building.
The guy and his son, and they had gone elsewhere, and we were in the nurses' quarter on our own. And this is so easy to skeptically debunk. It's not even true, obviously, but I don't think they were anywhere near us, and I don't think they could hear what was going on.
No,
there was some discussion about money that was coming, and we were asking questions and getting things back, and $1 was mentioned, and I had said I'm not quite clear whether you're asking me to leave you $1 or whether you want to give me $1. And we didn't get a clear answer to that, and in the end, it stopped, and we decided to move on, and we went and found the guys, and we went elsewhere in the building.
No, when we walked out of there,
when we were leaving the building.
No, it wasn't. No. It was when we came out of the nurses' apartment. And that's the thing, that door was mostly closed to the nurses' apartments. We came out of, I know that place. I know that place really well.
The staircase up.
Right when you come out of the nurses' apartments and you turn to your right, there's a staircase that goes up to the fourth floor. There was $1 laying there. There's a $1 bill laying there that I know was not there.
But it was the guy's son who, as we walked past, he said, "Oh, what's that?" And it was $1 bill lying on the stairs.
But how?
Well, because he put it there.
Why?
But
no, that was weird. But
that would be my rational, skeptical explanation, and that's why I say it's so easy to debunk. But at the time, I have no doubt that they could not have heard that conversation.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what a weird thing to do, dealing with ghosts. Why would you leave $1 dealing with ghosts? Like, that's not,
No, but it had been specifically mentioned. I mean, physical manifestations must be extremely rare, I would think.
They are, yeah, for sure. Anything physical, visual, do seem to be quite rare. I've never, with my eyes, seen that full-bodied ghost or apparition that, everyone would love to see. But
I don't know about
certainly,
that, about loving to see.
Oh, yeah. Well, at least that, I should say, most investigators would love to see. But some do claim to see them at times. Even people I work with have claimed to see them. I've certainly seen visual things that are hard to explain, a little more shadow-like.
Are you
But
skeptical of that? Are you skeptical of people that say, I saw a man and he was in old-timey clothes and he looked, are you skeptical of that, honestly?
I am, of course, yeah, every time. It gets a little harder when multiple people see it, whether at the same time or different times. But you have to, because it's so fantastic of a thing to think about. To just say, oh, that definitely happened. I mean, I think it would be a little silly, honestly. You need to figure that out. I mean, just because I haven't seen one doesn't mean I don't believe. I feel like if I didn't believe, I may have given up, by now. But still looking.
So I noticed I watched your latest outing, the documentary, full-length documentary that you've made, The House in Between, which I watched a couple of nights ago. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You produced and directed that, and you're also part of some of the investigation. There's a lot of questions I'd like to ask you about that, but it'd be difficult to without giving spoilers, really. But I noticed in it, you're seen to be very keen to find the physical explanation for something that appears to be paranormal. I don't think I'm giving anything away particularly, but when the baseball is rolling down the stairs, you're under the stairs, banging away on the stairs, trying to see if you can make the baseball move. Everybody's blowing on the baseball, trying to see if you can create enough wind to make it move, without success. But you're very quick to look for the obvious rational explanation.
Yeah, definitely. I want to, we're, by believing everything and just thinking all of these things are 100% paranormal and unexplained in some, force that we can't see. You do need to look at it a little deeper. You'd be quite, I think, doing a disservice to yourself, to the paranormal field, and to the people who, you're delivering the information to. Getting to the bottom of it, I think, is quite important. And I did try, quite a bit. Got in touch with some great physicists. It took me, I want to say, a full year or so to even find a few physicists that would talk to me. That most of them were just, paranormal. What? Get out of here.
Well, I'm sure there are many that are interested, but have a fear of being sort of ridiculed by colleagues and things. The scientific community.
Yep, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, every geologist I talked to, or geophysicist, literally, as soon as they were like, "Well, what's the project about?" "Oh, no, gotta go. Sorry." But a few did say the exact thing that you said. They said, I would lose my funding. I would. They would think I was. But we were, some people were very gracious, and Dr. Dye is super cool and a funny guy, and I even kept in there, you know, some of the scrutiny that we deal with, you know, in the paranormal world. You know, I ask him, "Do you believe in ghosts?" Or maybe Kendall did, but when you hear him, he looks at me and he's like, "No, I believe in science, you know, not ghosts." That's I think he called it magic. He's like, "It's magic." He doesn't believe in that stuff, but
Mm.
still super very insightful, clearly, and very nice guy. And but yeah, we do try to get to the bottom of things. And you know, there was a whole world of investigating where everything sort of was a ghost. You know, an orb was a ghost, a flash of light was a ghost, your camera lanyard was a ghost, all of these different things. And you know, quite honestly, it wasn't until I joined forces with uh, Jason, you know, I was still very skeptical and approached it, but I was a little more believing of things. And it wasn't until we sort of started talking that I was like, well, you know, you need to take it 2 or 3 more steps and really figure out, you know, what it is. Orbs, you know, he was the first one that showed me, like, no, watch this. Hit a pillow, videotaped it, and there were 5 orbs in the room. He's like, it's dust, man.
Right.
Like, come on,
See, you're
you
big,
know.
you're big on
I know.
orbs, and
Well,
I think they're nonsense.
I am, and I mean, I accept everything everybody says about orbs and rods and so forth. Yeah, but I know we've been in places like Trans Allegheny, taken photograph, taken photograph, taken photograph, taken photograph. There's a crystal clear photograph, photograph full of orbs,
Mhm.
or with a couple of orbs, or with it looks like it's
Like the
raining. There are
rods.
so many rods running across the frame, and these are photographs taken, you know,
Like rapid
seconds
succession. Yeah.
apart. When nobody's, it's not like between one photograph and the next, somebody was jumping up and down and waving their arms around, which would have dislodged a lot of dust in the room. Nothing has changed. And these photographs are perfectly normal, and this one isn't. There's actually a moment in the house in between that didn't get commented on. And I'm watching it and I went, oh, and I wound back on it when the psychic comes to the house. And I'm skeptical about psychics, but her contribution was really very interesting. And I do have questions about that. But she's in the in after she's been outside and she comes back in again, she's in the room, she starts to walk that way, and an orb comes into frame here behind her, stops and turns and goes in a straight line across frame. And I don't know whether you noticed it, but it didn't. Nobody mentioned it in the documentary, and it's very clear. And it does this. It's not like, you know, dust wanders around in the air, or it, you know, it gently floats downwards or upwards or whichever way the wind is blowing. This comes in a diagonal line, stops, turns, and goes that way in a straight line. Dust can't do that.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, you know, there definitely some footage out there of orbs that look like they have their own flight path and are moving with an intelligence or at least a direction. You know, but um, I think the majority of them can be explained by water molecules in the atmosphere, dust, things like that. Does that explain all of them? Maybe not. You know, there are scientists who can recreate orbs in a laboratory where they will get a ball of light that shows up as a sphere and they can photograph it. And so energy can show up that way.
Mm.
Uh, and so it could, but I think by, you know, the most, you know, for sure seem to be just atmospheric phenomena and not anything paranormal in that regard. But when it comes to the house in between, certainly, you know, it is there and you can see it, but we kept the whole orb narrative out of it. We didn't, you know, at least,
Don't wade into
you
that
know,
one.
so even to just, right. So no reason to really, but even when I first started working with those investigators over there, they would, show me all their evidence and get really excited about things. And, I would say to them, we're looking for something a bit more, a bit, and they started calling it the Steve filter, begrudgingly. They were like, oh, it doesn't pass, the Steve filter or whatever. So we tried to know. And when it comes to the ball rolling down the stairs, we did try to get to the bottom of that, even talking to geologists about could there be any sort of gas pockets, or, could it be possible for something to just rumble right under the stair? We did get to the bottom of a lot of things. And to me, I was a bit, on the fence in terms of that type of activity. But to me, being there to help them and to help Alice, it's what she believes is what I'm there to service, not necessarily what I believe, So by getting the answers, and even when it came to using a psychic, Alice was the one who said, well, I would really like one to come in, because I did before, and it was um and realistically, the only way I agreed to it was that it couldn't be. And I have some psychics that I love, that are very close friends of mine, but I didn't want, to have any of them involved, just because it could seem like there's a bias there. I wanted it to be somebody I didn't know at all. So Jill, who is the psychic in the film, she had, and I only know this because I'm one of the people who facilitated it, but she had no idea, and she was a little uncomfortable about it, you could tell, but I would be too, I guess. But she had no idea where she was going. All she knew is that she was flying to, I think it was Jackson. We flew somewhere in Mississippi, and that's it. She went straight from the airport to the house, didn't even go to her hotel. She was filmed the whole way. Right, yeah. So she literally had no idea. She had no idea where she was going, what the case was. So for her to come up with some of the things that she came up with, I honestly have no idea how she could have done that.
And it was
Um,
it was it was a moment where I felt slightly frustrated, because what was so interesting was that she felt drawn to go out of the back door into the yard that apparently, as far as we knew, didn't have anything to do with what was going on, but she felt compelled to go out there. And we get then this notion. It's one of the things that I found intriguing at the beginning is that this is not an old dark house; it's a new build,
mhm.
and that phenomena started to happen even while the house was being built. Um, but what she was picking up was that there had been a previous house, which was slightly offset to the new build house, um, but we didn't get any follow up on that. Is that because of the thing that comes up that there was I forget the name of the town where Alice's house is, that
Yep.
there had been a substantial fire which had destroyed all records. So were you not able to find any information about that previous house?
We weren't able to find anything in the records that said that there was a house there. And at the time, uh, for whatever reason, there were a few different, but we couldn't get a geologist or a geophysicist that would work with us and really go. And you could, do something like ground penetrating radar.
You said that would show
And
up the foundations, wouldn't it?
sure,
Disturbed ground.
Right.
yeah, it would, but it would still be a bit speculative. So we sort of just, but I will say since we have been able to work with a geologist who, did find some evidence of a structure back there. Um, so, they're still actively investigating and working, on that property.
Am I sensing a house in between two?
I don't know about that,
Because that
but
was my feeling at the
uh,
end. It felt like, well, this needs to be an ongoing investigation. You know, um, I want more, because it. I was thinking about the Skinwalker Ranch, which I'm absolutely hooked on. It's one of the most fascinating
Have
things.
you ever been there, Steve?
no, I haven't. No.
it's a trip, that. I mean, it's the kitchen sink. You name it in terms of paranormal phenomena, and it's going on. And what I like about the show is that they are taking an absolutely scientific approach to investigating it. They're
Mhm.
using science all the time, and that's kind of your field, no? Because certainly early on, I get the impression in Ghost Hunters that um, the what's the word I want, the machines, the devices,
Sure, the gadgets, the EMF gauges, all that stuff.
that's,
Mm.
Yeah,
that's your field, and you were less on camera uh, than you are now in Ghost Nation and in the house in between. So that's your field, the kind of trying to use scientific methods to locate
yeah.
whatever it is that's going on.
I've always liked the gadgets, and through season, I think 1 and 2, I was a what on the show anyway referred to as a tech specialist, and then Brian, who was the tech manager, uh, we had to remove him from the team. I started working in that capacity, and then yeah, there was a bit of a focus on the gadgetry and seeing how we could push the field. And it was right about the time when Grant left the show, and I sort of took on that sort of secondary role on Ghost Hunters, um, where I started to really dig quite deep into the science. And then through Ghost Nation, um, I studied particle physics quite deeply, and have been treading that water quite a bit. And now with Ghost Hunters again, which on Halloween we have a new Ghost Hunter starting on Discovery, Discovery Plus specifically. But um, I do investigate that way now, where if it disobeys the laws of science, not that I'm so deep that I know everything by far. That's the craziest thing. But I feel like if I try to remind myself, if it disobeys the laws of science, then I'm most likely misinterpreting the experience, and
Mm.
just a quick, for instance, what I mean about that is like shadows on a wall, right? You see a shadow on a wall, and there have been times when I could have thought that a shadow on a wall was something paranormal, because you hear that all the time. There's a shadow there, but first, the intent, you have to think, well, why, if something could present itself as a shadow-like being, or if it was just whatever you want to think it is, the beginning stage of a manifestation, but why would it be on a wall? It would just be there, so the intent doesn't make sense. But furthermore, understanding a little bit about particle physics and how things work, your brain just automatically goes, oh, for in order there to be a shadow on the wall, something would have to be blocking a light source. And if there was enough energy for something paranormal to be considered, if there was enough energy there to be accumulated to block a light source, then I would have to be able to see
See
that
it.
with my
Yeah,
eyes,
exactly.
and I don't see anything. So automatically, I would just dismiss that as just a
Right.
shadow on the wall. So that's how I try to investigate now. And I think most of the field does try to take that approach of not considering, but I do that hoping it is paranormal. Of course, that's what I
Right.
want and what I love. And when that happens, I certainly, me and Jay, Tango and I, we high five and we get so excited. We run around the room. It's so exciting.
Sure.
But it's so I do hope it is paranormal, but I think we would be doing a disservice if we
Yeah.
always thought it was paranormal.
Do you get scared, or is it just
I was about to ask
is
that.
it is it just kind of, oh, it's that again now?
I, I get startled for
Mm.
sure, but not necessarily scared. Startled, absolutely, many times, almost every time,
Mm.
whether it's something paranormal or an animal, or just seeing a mirror all of a sudden. There are a lot of different ways you can scare yourself in a haunted place.
Yes.
But yeah, luckily I'm not really afraid of the paranormal. There was something happened recently that made made me jump back quite a bit. But even after your heart rate goes down, you start smiling over it. It's not like you leave there with a fear of it.
I have a question, but I do want to, because we've been ignoring
We have been ignoring the
the
chat.
chat and our giveaway. Are you there, David, or are you asleep?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just letting you guys go do your thing.
Yeah. Do you want to flash the giveaway tonight and tell everybody what it is?
Sure
Are we
can.
getting questions? Are we ignoring people, or are
I
they?
think a lot of people are talking
or-
amongst themselves and sharing their.
We
you
did.
know,
We did say last week that if people had experiences they
Yeah.
wanted to share, or even ask
It's-
Steve about, then
Yeah.
then that's cool. So
It's hard.
Yeah,
But
some people
anyway,
want to
this is
share their ghost stories as well.
I still have about
Yeah.
18 questions in my head. I
And-
want to ask Steve.
Yeah, and even though next week, will be after the fact. I mean, it'll be us, so we can. It's, it's a spooky
Yeah.
show. We talk about spooky things, and it doesn't have to be around Halloween time to do that. But this is a group photo. It's not an 8x10. It's slightly odd size.
Oh,
It's like an 8x11.
have you checked that I've got more of that size?
We have envelopes for that.
No, but have you checked I've got more of that size? Otherwise, I'll
Yes.
have to
Yes, you
use
do.
an 8x10.
Yes, you
Okay.
do.
All right. Okay.
So this is it's not an 8x10. It's slightly elongated. It's like more like an 8x11 or 8x12.
Taken on the set of Hellbound. So it's Barbie Wilde playing the female Cenobite.
Some weird goth band.
We do. Pinhead and the Cenobites.
Yes.
Yeah.
So most gifted subs will get that.
And it'll come signed
and-
by me. And if you let Nathan or David know what dedication you want, you shall have that. Those gifted subs by the end of the
Yes.
show. It does help us keep chugging along here.
Yes, give us a purpose. I was going to ask, because this is my issue with ghosts, and my whole life I've been interested in, spooky things and ghosts, and I think I've always wrestled with, wanting to see something, but not wanting to see something also.
Sure.
And, people, why wouldn't you want to see a ghost? And I will say that I think if you actually did see something like a full body apparition, I think you would be forced to really reevaluate everything.
Yeah.
Everything you think and know about life in general. I think that would really force you to, give it all a second thought,
Yeah, that it would be uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people, but you would certainly grow through that experience. You might
But in
as well
what way,
know. True, but yeah, I mean, I always feel like it's better to know than not to know,
Sure.
because it's there regardless.
Right.
And you'll have to face that at some point.
Right.
To what extent do you think that let's for the sake of argument, let's call them spirits. Let's agree that it's spirits, and we're in Trans-Allegheny, or we're in somebody's house, or we're in an old brewery or an old mill lighthouse, wherever it may be, and we encounter whatever EVPs we encounter, whatever noises we encounter. Maybe we even see an apparition. Now, you believe they are the spirits of the dead and that they are communicating with us from another place. To what extent, though, because while I don't think I believe in life after death, and I don't think I believe in spirit existence after death. Consciousness, maybe, and I think that's a whole other conversation. But I do believe that buildings hold energy.
Absolutely.
I absolutely believe that. We all know there are even we've had the experience in a former house that Steph was in with her kids that she rented. Nobody wanted to be upstairs in that building. Nobody. And I never said anything to Steph at the time. It was only after we'd moved out. I happened to say casually, we'd never talked about it. And I said casually, the upstairs in that house, I only ever went up there, I think 2 or 3 times. And I never saw anything or heard anything. I just became aware as soon as I was upstairs that I'd like to be downstairs again.
It felt wrong. It felt off.
And then you discovered that
and then I found out a previous tenant fell down the stairs and broke both of her legs. And then two tenants that came after me, two separate renters, also had experiences upstairs. One of them had a child that absolutely refused to sleep upstairs, screamed and yelled. So something was going on. Something.
Steph's kids who were quite young, they slept up there, and bless them, they never complained about anything.
But
But
they would
almost every
often-
morning
they
they were in
would
each
come-
other's beds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they would go into each other's
Or
beds.
come down to you.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we still talk about it because we pass that house often.
And I am a believer. I feel that about Trans-Allegheny.
As soon
that
as you walk in there,
that-
you feel it.
that everything is soaked into the fabric of the building. To what extent do you think that if we're going to call these spirits, that you believe that they have an existence outside the building? I tend to believe that these phenomena are absolutely tied to the locality or to the fabric of the building.
Sure. I mean, that is a common theory, and we consider that a residual type of haunting, where it is just like a residual energy. It's more like a playback. And I have talked to physicists, and you can read literature about this on your own, where large deposits of quartz, limestone, different minerals, most likely quartz over limestone, can hold energy. Scientists have been able to send frequencies into mountainsides and then retrieve those same frequencies at a later date. So
you touch on that in the house in between, I think, because it's supposed to be limestone underwater, and water running over limestone can create like a battery effect, right?
Well, sort of, yeah. I mean, not water in itself, because the earth can't create its own charge, a law of science. So water in and of itself on the earth wouldn't create a charge. But if that water running over the limestone, or quartz was struck by lightning, say a few times, perhaps there could be a momentary charge that could travel a path, for sure. But that's the residual type of haunting, and that would even explain how you can have a haunting of somebody who's even still alive, because that's a phenomena we see sometimes. It's just that traumatic event or that loving and caring or devotion type of event in life that can, trap that moment in time, perhaps theoretically. So that certainly is, but there does seem to be an intelligent side to this, things that are happening and being able to interact with the physical world here. I have been on investigations and recorded things and seen things that are only, explained in that way, that there has to be something there with an intelligent thought behind it. So personally, I do believe that there is both sides there, but having that skeptical mindset and waiting until that unfolds for yourself, I think is also important, because maybe I wouldn't believe in that either if I hadn't had experiences that make me think that way. So I think a skeptical mindset is important. I think being a skeptic is a little dangerous, because skeptics have an agenda. They don't believe, and they don't want other people to believe either. So they have a bit of an aggressive agenda there. But to think skeptically, 100%, you should absolutely.
I think as you describe yourself is a good way to be a good position to be in. That open-minded skepticism. I mean, there is stuff that we talked a little bit before we went on about, things holding, bad vibes, as it were, and being haunted, and certain things I won't bring into the house, or certain things I won't throw away, or, and then I think other things are complete nonsense. So it's, I sort of, I think we both do. We sit on the fence a bit, and, we're not always trying to disbelieve, and we believe some other things, and we, look into some other things, and we're not totally closed off, and we're not totally like, oh yeah, I'm gonna believe every piece of nonsense you tell me,
Yes, because I sometimes feel like there isn't a building or a cemetery in America that isn't haunted. America America has a great yearning to be haunted. My own private theory is that it's an outward manifestation of America's internally haunted psyche.
Mm.
And America, in its collective unconscious, has a lot to be haunted by and about. Slavery, obviously, and let's politely call what happened to Native Americans ethnic cleansing, if we're not going to call it genocide. But there's an awful lot in the American psyche that is uncomfortable, and I sometimes wonder whether America's need to be haunted is not a reflection of its own uneasy collective unconscious.
Right.
Am I wandering into highfalutin territory there? That's my pet back of a match.
And we do have we have an inflated sense of 100 years to us is old. Well, 100 years to you is nothing, and being from the UK.
The best distinction between Brits and Americans that
something's 100 years old, it must be haunted,
Americans think 100 years is a long time, and the Brits think 100 miles is a long way.
Yes.
But also you mentioned studying particle physics. You know enough from that to know that when you get into particle physics, this is as much metaphysics as it is straightforward science. Once you're starting to talk about these things like, quarks and these particles that have been given these wonderfully poetic names like strangeness and charm, and the God particle, and is it tachyons, that they have these huge underground vats of water trying to catch them. And if they do catch them, they will be traveling backwards in time. When we go back to the very beginnings of the Big Bang, and you fall into string theory, and they say about string theory that if you think you understand it, it means you don't understand it. And once you start to get into those, trillionths of a nanosecond after the Big Bang, all the laws of physics appear to break down. They aren't working. So physics, it's so, even like when they started to examine light particles to see whether light operated like a wave or a particle, the answer was both, and at the same time, which if the experiment hadn't proved that, would be impossible. You can't be a wave and a particle at the same time. You have to be one and the other, or the other. But light is and can be both at the same time. So even within physics, the laws of physics break down.
Yeah, it's I mean, for my head to wrap around all of that, getting into quantum physics and different, I have no figuring skills, but I'm great at regurgitating, what I've learned.
Yeah, I can talk a lot about stuff that I really don't understand.
But you're right, and you'll hear physicists talk. Brian Cox, at the CERN Institute, at the CERN lab there, it says this is physics as we understand it, as we are able to understand it, but there could be a whole set of physics that maybe is outside of our current understanding, other dimensions, and it takes time for a lot of them. It could just be a gas or something they, discover is real and are able to study and harness it. And then all of a sudden physics changes a little bit.
Hello,
but that's exactly it. Dark matter's been knocking on their door for quite some time.
Crazy stuff. And the idea that it's 95% of the visible universe doesn't exist.
It's terrifying to think about, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all Yeah, it's really fascinating, and you can go either way. You know, particle physics being, uh, you know, the smallest and tiniest of measurable science, and then there's astrophysics, which is, you
Mm.
know, science on a huge scale. Both are equally interesting, and I think astrophysics is probably a bit scarier than you know, particle physics is just nerd stuff and figuring out how things can move in the environment, and you know, magnetic field, that sort of thing. But on the big scale, it's quite unsettling to think about. You know, billions of galaxies, just as big as our galaxy, infinite infinities. It's just
Yeah, that's
mind
the kind of
blowing.
stuff you think of when it starts pushing you into like an anxiety attack if you really
Yes, it
focus on
does.
it a bit too much.
Well, I
Yep.
used to play the game with my kids when they were small. You know that you can point to this star, and tell them that when the light that is hitting their retina tonight left that star, um, the Romans were still in Britain, and
Oh,
that star we were still living in caves. And when the light that you're seeing tonight from that star left it, this planet didn't exist.
it's really
Um,
fascinating.
but and it's scary too, and that leaves you, I think, to a to a kind of Lovecraftian model of the universe, which is very cold and largely indifferent
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
us and our existence. And we know that that if people are observing a star on the other side of the universe and it blinks out, just isn't there anymore tonight. Um, Astronomers might remark on it, and it might be an exciting thing, but we're not going to go into, into torments of grief over the creatures that might just have died out there.
Right.
And the same may, well, and will one day be true of us, because we know enough now to know that we are dependent on what is roughly a middle-aged star, merrily burning through its supply of fuel at a pretty rapid rate, it seems to me. um,
Yeah.
and one of these days, it's not going to be there. And when it's not there, we won't be either.
Mm-mm. Nope. Oh, nothing will survive without the sun. You know, there's not, um, unless we somehow find a way to transcend. Elon Musk, you know, he thinks everybody will be hooked up to computer databases, and maybe we can escape our finite life that way. But
No
until
thanks.
then,
No thanks.
we're just, yeah, that sounds scary too. But
Gigabyte.
What, live forever, essentially?
Well,
God, no.
virtually in outer space.
No thanks.
Well, but on a tiny level, this is guaranteed, because all the building blocks of life on this planet is literally stardust.
yeah,
And when our star dies, and uh, however it goes, whether it's a red dwarf or a red, is it a white dwarf or a red giant? Is it that way around? Um, whether we
That
go
sounds like
in a
Doctor
blaze
Who
of
talk
light,
to
or
me.
whether we slowly freeze to death. Um,
right.
when the star's not there, we will eventually fall out of orbit, and we'll collide with everything else in the solar system, and everything will go to shit.
This is all very uplifting.
But
Yeah,
we
it's
will all become stardust, and
that's right.
we will all travel out into the universe, and may well eventually land on another planet somewhere and become part of a different kind of life, and
Yeah.
proceed to fuck that planet up as well.
Seems to be what happens, you know, where but and that's all true. I think it's Carl Sagan, you know, it says we're all stardust. You know, we can pretend that we know what's happening and where we're going and what's after this, but when you boil it all down, we're all part of the same star.
Someone said deep thoughts with Doug Bradley.
Deep thoughts. Well, we can bring it back to Joni Mitchell. We are stardust.
Yeah.
We are gold.
Mm.
To get ourselves back to the garden.
On a lighter note, Steve.
On a lighter note.
So going
Oh,
back
gosh.
to my issue of certain things being haunted and such, do you have any superstitions?
That's a good question. I do the what I think everybody sort of as a superstition. You may, kind of say, "Oh, I'm not going to walk under that ladder," or "I'm not going to, you know, mess around in that regard." But not really, not too many. I have a lot of things. People always ask, "What do you do to protect yourself before an investigation? How do you?"
Hmm.
Get things to stop you, or excuse me, get things to stop from following you home. Uh, and, I have a lot of things that I've acquired from haunted places, a lot of things that are supposedly haunted, a lot of things you think would be haunted. I do have, we talked earlier, I do have some skulls and human skulls and skeletons and things like that that you would think would be haunted, but nothing is ever, not that I know of. But then again, we don't know what their, like we mentioned earlier, their interpretation of time and space is.
Right.
Maybe I've only had, this leg over here for, 3 months, but to them it may be no time at all.
See, I
But
just think, when someone, you risk someone
Some poor
wanting their
sod's
fucking
missing a
leg
leg
back,
somewhere, Steve. Yeah,
give me my
he's
leg back. you know?
limping around his haunted
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
might
My
be
fucking leg.
Keep falling
right
over.
back here. Exactly, and I have a sword that I think is most certainly haunted. I enjoyed the experience so much that I had to have it. It's a Civil War era sword. It's pretty
Mm.
awesome. It's right behind me, but nothing's ever happened, around it.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of,
Cool.
yeah,
How did you
and
come
that's pretty
across that?
awesome. We used it as what we call a trigger object, where it's an item of familiarity to whatever might be there. And there was somebody there who wasn't only a mason, but uh, was also a soldier, and we were inviting it. We have what's called a trigger object proximity sensor. It's just a device that creates a magnetic field around anything you clip it to, and then so if that bubble is broken, it alerts you.
Mhm.
And we had that connected to uh, the sword, and as we invited something to grab its sword, it detected it, and it happened a few times in a row. And I loved it so much, I bought the
I would
sword.
not have been
Wow.
bringing that into my house. Mm-mm.
Well, nothing's happened. I still have it. Yeah, and nothing. And this is I have this
Leg
just
hanging
this
around.
stuff and
Yeah.
nothing like. It's so, but that's just me. Some people, they may acquire these items and think something is happening, or maybe something does. And quite honestly, I wouldn't. If I thought it did bring something to my house, I'd probably get rid of it. I
Mhm.
don't want to live
Oh,
in a haunted house. I value sleep. I value relationships and friendships, and I value, fulfillment from careers and all of that. And
Yeah.
most people who live in a real haunted house have a hard time sustaining.
Yes. What's the old line that the sound of children laughing is the most beautiful sound in the world, unless it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you don't have any children.
Yeah, and you don't have any children. I like that.
We live in an old house. Our house, we figure it's about
It's
100,
100
about
years
100
old,
years
or
old.
very
Yeah.
nearly. Yeah.
And someone did die in this house. They apparently went into
Somewhere under our feet.
the crawl space and had a heart attack and died. We didn't find that out till after the fact, but we've never had any weird issues here.
Again,
We've
it was
never had any
after
weird
we'd been here for a
dealings.
while, we kind of compared notes, and we both agreed we'd
There's
been
not
all
a
over
s-
the house and
it's
sat in all
It's a
corners
big
of
old
the house.
house.
Never felt anywhere but anything other than calm and
Yeah, totally.
at ease.
It's because of the crystal. It's because I left the crystal here.
That's a weird thing.
When we moved in, there was this. It's the dumbest thing. It's like, it looks like some sort of sculpture, like a little sort of cylindrical face sculpt,
Mhm.
almost maybe made out of clay or something, and then there's a crystal attached to it. So it
looks like a piece of cheap
it's
glass.
almost like the
really a
size of
crystal.
this pen. That's some kind of shitty crystal. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean that. It's about this
Oh.
size, right? So it's got the little sculpture on top and it's got the crystal down below. And it was hanging on the wall. I mean, we had a typical Pittsburgh basement, dingy, shitty, dirty. And it was hanging on the wall.
So I come along, with the garbage bag. We'll
And
get rid of
don't
that. We'll
touch
get
that.
rid of that. Well, we don't want this, do we? She's like, oh my God, don't touch it.
Don't touch
It's
it. Don't
not-
touch it. And we had a friend come in and redo our basement, make it a bit nicer. So, you'd want to come down and do laundry, not be, creeped out.
Brushing
And
the cobwebs
and
off
I wouldn't
yourself.
let him touch it. I said, you have to work around it. Don't get rid of this.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's nonsense, but don't touch it. It's all gonna go
Do you think
wrong.
it's cursed or
I'm like, probably not. No, but
offering protection?
I will make up things.
In Steph's mind, it is.
I will make up things, and then I have to abide by them. Like the time I was walking through the hospital parking lot, and there's this really cool set of rosary beads laying in the crosswalk, and my first instinct, oh, cool, take this home, add it to the collection of weird religious things, and I go, oh, wait a minute. Maybe the person who had these were going to see somebody that was dying or something. So I went right in and I turned them in at the desk at the hospital.
Maybe he was,
if I
maybe he
bring
was
them
the priest on
home,
his way to the exorcism
Yeah.
that the devil made have a heart attack.
yeah, if I bring them home,
Yeah.
everything could go very wrong.
Bring the
So,
bad
but it's
juju
shit
or
like
something.
that. I just,
So you have some superstitions.
yeah. But like I
Mhm.
said, I have like I have a hand, it's a skeleton.
Yeah.
I have a scapula. I have a few other odds and ends, and I didn't have any hesitation to bring those in.
We also-
Certain
we
things, I
all
get
s-
feelings,
We all
weird
say
feelings
bless you
about.
when somebody sneezes.
Well, that's just
and that's
dumb,
supposedly
but,
a medieval belief that you blew a hole in your soul
you sneeze.
when you sneezed, through which the devil could
Mm.
enter. So the bless you was to
Right.
protect you against the devil. And supposedly you're never supposed to say thank you, because if you say thank you, you negate the blessing,
Oh,
because the blessing is
Ah.
freely given and you shouldn't express gratitude for it.
hmm.
Jeez.
I
All
don't think
right.
I have any real superstitions though.
No,
Other than that.
actors have them a lot, like
Mhm.
sportsmen have them a lot. Like, some players want to be first on the pitch, last on the pitch,
Mm.
put the left boot on before the right boot. And some actors, like to leave getting ready until the very last minute. Others like to be in the theatre and ready an hour before. And obviously Macbeth is the most well-known one. That you
Right.
cannot say Macbeth. It's particularly an English theatre tradition. And I've been on the receiving end of it, because I didn't really think it was, when I were a younger actor, I didn't really think it was a live issue. But working with older actors, I said Macbeth. They got furious with me, and I had to leave the dressing room, turn silver over in my pocket and spit on the floor, and then knock on the door and ask permission to come back in, and I was ignored. I did it again and I was ignored, and the third time they gave me permission to come back in and made me
Wow.
swear
Ridiculous.
blind that I would never. That's why you will hear actors, particularly in theatres, they will talk about the Scottish play.
Mhm.
They won't name Macbeth.
Interesting.
It's supposedly because Shakespeare was using real incantations in the play, which he absolutely was not. He's making it up.
Mhm.
And there are stories, that there are the three witches that the script calls for. In fact, they're never called witches, I don't think. They're weird sisters, I think it's what they're described as. That people saw a fourth witch, on stage. But the version of events which I like much more was that Macbeth has always been Shakespeare's biggest box office play, because it's got ghosts in it, apart from anything else, and a lot of death.
Two big
So,
sellers.
so yes. So if you were, particularly this goes back to the days when you would be doing you would be in a theater to do a run, and you got paid out of the box office. And if things weren't going well, then the production manager would announce, we're doing Macbeth. And that meant two things. It meant we're closing the season early and we're doing Macbeth to try and get some money. But you're going to, on the other side of Macbeth, you're out of work. So if anyone talked in the theater about doing Macbeth, it meant we're all about to be out of a job. That makes a whole lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
I mean,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
no, please. But it seems that a lot of superstitions come from some root, cultural or, sort of rule, underspoken rule, and then it becomes a superstition over time. Even in Hamilton, the play, the musical Hamilton, everything in the play, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, talks about how this was kind of just a nod to that. Everything in the play is fine, 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 and then about midway, when he actually says Macbeth in the play, from that moment forward, everything in Hamilton's life goes crazy and out of control. Loses his, his wife leaves him, all of that stuff. He sleeps with the woman, everything, it goes crazy in his life. And he said that was a nod to the Macbeth superstition, which is kind of cool.
Cool.
Somebody wanted to know, have you ever scrapped an episode because absolutely nothing had happened in the location?
We have scrapped episodes, but not because nothing happened. We usually show those. You'll see episodes where we do say, this was fun. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of history. We soaked in some culture. We met some awesome people. But in our time here, it doesn't seem that there's anything happening. We tried to minimize those episodes, if we're being honest, by picking places with a higher frequency of activity and that sort of thing, because even for us, it's a way more fun when things are happening and you're in, but we do have times when nothing happens, and you'll see that in Ghost Hunters, the earlier days, in Ghost Nation, and even in the new Ghost Hunters that's coming out. We do have some times when we're like, all right, maybe there's not too much going on. Don't get me wrong, there's
so
some awesome stuff.
This is a new season of Ghost Hunters or a new season of Ghost Nation?
This is going to be Ghost Hunters.
Right.
Yeah, we're back to doing a Ghost Hunters. And it starts on Halloween.
On this coming Saturday night?
Sunday.
Sunday. Yep.
Yeah.
Sunday night.
Yeah.
On the Travel Channel? Or on Discovery?
It'll be on Discovery Plus. Yeah. And eventually Travel, perhaps.
Only on Discovery Plus? Not on regular?
Yeah. Right.
Gonna have to pay for the streaming service, people.
Do you think when will a point come? You've been doing this for a long time. When you think, well, I've seen it all, I've been everywhere. That that's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there will come a point when you're ready to wrap it up, or no?
I don't think
run
so.
out of places to explore or questions to ask, or
I mean, could we run out of places to investigate? I mean, I suppose it is possible, but unfortunately, I feel like the things that sort of spark the phenomena we chase tends to continue to happen. Tragedy seems to be the biggest imprint, or the biggest sort of thing that we are investigating, but also great moments of love and devotion to somebody or something. Or so that's always happening. That's always going to happen. So I think the phenomena will always be there. Will there come a point where people may not want us in their houses anymore? Sure, that could happen.
And you can go back to places that you've been before, and it's never the same thing twice.
True.
That's true. Yeah, we've done some of the same places many times, and it's even true where you could have us taps go into a place and investigate, or just me alone or whoever, and a different team go in, and you'll have two different results. Isn't always the same for every team. Each team has their own sort of protocols and procedures and different things that they like to use in terms of the equipment, but yeah, it can always be different.
I had
They
a
haven't
couple
done
of
my
things.
house yet.
Oh,
Are you your house
we'll
haunted,
get there.
David?
Oh, based on that medallion thing I told you about.
Oh, the wrestling. The ghost that wanted to
Oh,
watch the wrestling
mm.
show.
Yeah, so what
Did you let it watch the wrestling show like
I
we
did.
suggested?
I actually
Okay.
did. And so I been on this like kind of religious kick lately, like getting statues and crucifixes and stuff like that. And this guy was like, "Hey, I have a box that was in my house since I moved in. You can just have it." So he gives it to me, and I'm going through all of it, and I find all this cool stuff, and I find a necklace. I'm like, "Oh, this is really cool," but I flip it over, and there's somebody's ashes in the back of it.
Yeah, fuck.
Ooh.
So my TV would turn on by itself every night in the living room for like a month and a half straight, and then they told me to let whatever finish
leave
the
it on
show.
whatever I wanted to watch. Yeah.
It stopped, but I'm gonna like take it somewhere and bury it because I mean I don't need anything following me around. I'm already haunted enough.
No, I would have gotten rid of that immediately.
I just
Oh,
can't
man.
throw it away.
No.
You're not gonna have a producer if that happens.
Yeah, I would suggest doing something very, respectful and
I'll buy
Mhm.
a chicken sandwich.
yeah, buy it some dinner, drop it off at the cemetery or something, maybe.
Bring it to WrestleMania.
Bring it to WrestleMania.
Yeah, I might have to give it to the Undertaker.
Wear it to WrestleMania.
Give it to the
yeah.
Undertaker. Yeah.
There you go. That's where it's trying to get. That's where it's trying to get. Yep.
Or Monday Night Raw, whatever.
That's great.
I had to interrupt me if there are questions on the chat, because we are kind of people are chatting. Greetings from Brazil. Good Lord.
Yes.
Hello.
What time is it in Brazil?
Oh.
Is that Persiog 91? Hello to you in Brazil. Wow.
What were you gonna ask?
Yeah, it's really it's a filmmaking point of view, and one is a heartfelt plea.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Can the music?
Oh. Yeah.
Because it annoys the hell out of me.
Mhm.
And partly it's a practical thing, because I'll be watching and you'll all be sitting there and someone will say, "Did you hear that?"
Someone's playing a soundtrack in the next
I'm
room.
thinking, well, if the band would pipe down, I might have heard it, but I can't hear anything because the soundtrack is going and it's loud, and it's part of the thing. From anyone who's ever done this, Steph said, sitting in Lily's room in Trans-Allegheny, it is utterly silent, and you become
It's
hyper
very
aware of
unnerving.
every
Yes.
noise. And I wish we could share that, not to have no music in the show at all, but not to have music all the time, and don't do horror jump cuts, because it's not a horror film, it's a documentary.
Mm.
That's the heartfelt plea. And the other thing, and I wonder how much you've seen this change over 17 years now. And I felt it very strongly watching The House in Between, which I thought was fascinating. And there must be a sequel, and I will bug you to get that sequel made. I'll go with you. I'll go with you, and we'll carry on investigating.
That would be awesome.
Because I found it fascinating. But you've got fixed cameras in the house, looking around the house at different viewpoints. And my problem is that as soon as I see that, I think paranormal activity.
But they didn't start that. Paranormal
so
activity didn't start that.
Well,
thing.
no, I know, but they kind of owned it, I think, to some extent. But all right, not Paranormal Activity, but we're very used to seeing this now.
But it's effective,
And a lot
though.
of the things like, opening doors and baseballs falling downstairs, etc. In Insidious and
Don't look at me.
What's the other one? The
They sort of all
Warrens
blend
series
together.
of movies.
The Conjuring.
The Conjuring movies. They've done this so to death that I won't watch old Dark Houses movies anymore, new ones, because I know what you're going to do. I've seen it. And I watching The House in Between, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you're faking anything. I'm very sure that you're not. But there's an element where you're watching it and you think, well, something's going to happen. And I know something's going to happen because I've seen this before. And it's also at the same time now not startling when it happens because we're very used to it. Are you conscious of that as producer and director of the documentary?
It is in the paranormal world, has, of course, the surveillance with the DVR setup and the cameras has become, a trope in and of itself. But when it comes to us, you can even go all the way back to Poltergeist. You look at that movie. There was a command center with a TV monitor and the camera. So you're right; it goes back. But we were doing that long before Paranormal Activity or any of
Yeah,
those.
I mean, those movies are
That's
riffing on the
right.
investigators.
And they were very gracious when that movie came out, and sent us all messages saying we were inspired by what you do, and hoping you'll like this, and so they're all very gracious in paying their respects in that regard. But the thing that's important about it is you never know where or when it's going to happen, and whenever there's an experience, the first thing any investigator ever does is say, oh, was there a camera on it? And so a lot of times the DVR camera is that Hail Mary throw, like, oh, did it catch it? Do we have it at the right place? And you also never know when it's going to happen. There's no way to know the right place or the right time. So a stationary camera that can always monitor is quite valuable.
And if you take,
it's invaluable to you. It's purely from a point of view of as someone, as an audience member, purely just, I'm only looking at it as someone in the cheap seats with my bag of popcorn that I'm because I only ever sit in the cheap seats. It's very familiar.
For sure. You do see, especially in, I'd say this season of Ghost Hunters, and even with Ghost Nation, there was more of a focus on, technique and experiment and interacting. And we do real-time analysis now where we're listening in the moment and trying to really investigate in the moment instead of taking everything back and seeing what we may have caught. So I think you will see less of, say, the DVR and that sort of thing, and more of the in the moment investigating with things like LiDAR and radar and thermal. I can see where that would be played out, but it's so important to what the investigators do that it would be tough to get rid of it. You also don't know what spectrum you may see them in. Those night vision cameras allows you to see in the infrared spectrum. Some of them are full spectrum, so you can see ultraviolet, you can see the visible spectrum and the infrared spectrum. So there is some additional value to it. But you're right, it certainly can be something like, oh, this is.
I appreciate, though, I think the stationary camera, because you can't chalk anything up to just you can't chalk up something to the movement of the camera. That it's absolutely stationary, and if something moves, it's not the camera.
No.
So obviously it was something else. if you have a camera that's constantly moving around and almost looking like a, found footage movie, your eyes could play tricks on you and
But
convince
presumably,
you.
and you must be on the receiving end of this by the same token. Everything can be faked. And we live now in an age where you don't know whether to trust half the things you're seeing or being told. But we know that there's no phenomenon that you can capture on a fixed camera that can't be faked. And you are a television show, and it is edited into a program, and it could be CGI'd. And how would we ever know?
Yeah, how do you convince people that you're not? I mean, I'm sure you come across that all the time, people accusing you of faking things, and the lazy knee-jerk response of, oh, you photoshopped that, or
I don't think you have. Other shows have been directly accused of faking and embellishing, but I'm pretty certain you have not.
I'm sure they all get accused of it, but
casually, I'm sure.
All the shows, we've all been attacked in that regard, but the paranormal field has always gone through that. I remember seeing on the show sightings, specifically when I was a teenager, like 14 years old. Somebody was showing on how you could take 2 panes of glass and pull cotton and put them between the glass and then take a picture, and now you have an anomalous vapor in the atmosphere. And I was blown away by that. I was like, oh, they can fake this stuff. So so you're right, that could be something. When it comes to Photoshop, well, not necessarily Photoshop, but certainly CGI, I think that could be a little difficult to pull off, to make it convincing in terms of the monetary value it would, or it would take. And
yes,
and I think word would get out very quickly.
Word would get out to
Discovery Channel would be spending
yeah.
But it's never been my mission, or really any of our missions, to convince other people that what we are experiencing is really happening. All that really matters is that we believe it, that the clients believe it, and
it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
I have another question for you, Steve. This is interesting. On the Moors wants to know if there was a specific event or series of events that made you pursue ghost hunting. It's usually something.
For me, it wasn't necessarily a series of events. A few things come into mind. I was watching a movie called The Entity, and I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't supposed to be. I was too young for that, and I'm pretty sure I started getting quite upset. And my mom was like, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be watching this. This isn't
watching ghost rape. Stop."
Exactly. But then I saw at the end it said, based on true events, and I was like kind of hooked from that moment. I wanted to figure out what it was, and I went down the path that way. And as a young actually probably 19, 20, I worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren on some cases, and that's when I met John Zaffis, and
he was
became
there
friends
that
with
night
him.
at Trans-Allegheny when I went with you.
Oh yeah, he's great. That's Ed Warren's nephew. And so people think we were all put together for television, but I met John Zaffis when I was 14 years old for the first time, like at a talk for the Warrens, just being like, oh, will you sign my book or whatever I said. I don't
it's
remember.
Fantastic that you've seen that through like that. I mean, I've said before, when I was a boy, I was obsessed by ghosts, terrified of them, but couldn't get enough of them. And I got Harry Price's book out of the library in England about Borley Rectory. Harry Price was a old school paranormal investigator in England who's had a degree of accusations hurled at him in recent times. But I had the Borley Rectory book out, a lot of which was an extremely haunted house. Apparently, a lot of that it's now been suggested was faked at the time. Who knows? But I was obsessed by it, and the only thing I wanted to be was a psychic investigator. as I would have called it, and probably rather
Yep.
than paranormal investigator, but other things got in the way. The fascination never went away, but it's tremendous that you've been able to kind of, follow that fascination and sense of being terrified through to a career in it.
Yeah, very, very fortunate. Never thought there would be a career in television. Especially being a paranormal investigator. I was a police officer and a jeweler with my father, and it was just a hobby. Honestly. And then when we were lucky enough to have a television show, it wasn't, even the first season or two was a bit like, we don't know if this will ever keep going, and there wasn't much money at all. It was like pay for your gas, and that's maybe close to about it. But luckily it took off, and here we are 17 years later. Wow.
I have
It's
to
amazing.
ask you,
Fantastic.
I'm noticing behind you on the bookshelf, there looks to be a set of thinner books. Those aren't the Time Life ones.
Oh yeah,
Are they?
they are.
Hey! Yay!
Good eyeball.
Yeah. Yep. You got the
Yep.
whole set. Wow.
You have a good eye.
Yep.
You have a
Well,
really
it's
good
because I
eye.
was obsessed with those things.
Yeah,
Never
they're
had the
really
whole
good.
set. I found several volumes over the years in thrift stores and stuff, but I always wanted, I used to see it had a commercial. I'll show you the commercial later. Time Life.
When you're
What was it called? It's Time Life Mysteries.
Mysteries of the
Unexplained, or-
Unknown.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All different
mysteries.
volumes focused
Yep.
on. Yes, look at that. Wow. It's like,
When you're a young kid, 8 or 9 or 10, there's some scary stuff in there that you're like,
yep,
you
oh,
think
yeah.
Time Life, it has to be true, and then they're talking
Yes.
about witchcraft.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
there are werewolves? What the lycanthropy? What is that?
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's,
mean, that's where I first remember is going to the library in, elementary school, 3rd, 4th grade. And there was this, you probably will remember these. They had like orange and black covers. Some were like monsters, Dracula, King Kong, and there were ghosts and unexplained disappearances, like DB Cooper. So they had a few of those volumes, and there was a few of those in school, and that's sort of where
That's
it all. It
cool.
was always unexplained mysteries. Was always the collections that I went for.
It's so fun. Everybody likes, the unexplained and the mysterious, and a lot of people are, drawn to the darker side of history, which sadly usually is, what a haunting phenomena stems from. But
Absolutely.
um,
Which also
it's really
explains the
fascinating.
explosion in people being interested, or at least admitting that they're interested in true crime, or that used to be like a very taboo thing that nobody talked about. And I think it's the same as with ghosts and things like that. People are now feeling, comfortable with saying they're interested in it,
Yeah,
which is
for
cool.
sure.
Because, you don't feel like such a complete weirdo when you know how many people are into it,
It's even and about the end of season 1, early season 2, Ghost Hunters, you get recognized every once in a while, and people were like, I've seen you, like you're one of those, and they would literally say, one of those idiots that runs around in the dark. and but come the end of season 2, the beginning of season 3, there was a whole switch. People wanted our pictures and wherever we were, and it was like, oh, okay, there's a switch happened at some point in time. Everybody went, oh, this is cool.
acceptable to be
luckily, yeah. We
cool.
do get a lot of people that thank us for making it acceptable to talk about, and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that was necessarily us, but it's nice to be a part of.
I think you definitely played a part in that, for sure. I mean, you guys were sort of the pioneers, and everyone that's come after, well, it is 10 o'clock. Do we want
It
to
is.
wrap it up?
Whoa, wow, it's
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, it is.
Apparently.
Jeez,
Where are you
2
at?
hours like
Where are you
that.
located at, Steve?
I'm in
Uh,
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Cosmic
Yeah.
Cringe. This will be relevant to it. Cosmic Cringe. Can we scroll back up a bit? Is asking me, is there a movie that always stuck with me, and can I maybe say your name? Well, I've done that bit. Cosmic Cringe 781. Yeah, it's a movie that I saw when I was a boy on the BBC on TV at home. It's The Innocents, movie that was made in 1962, directed by Jack Clayton, based on Henry James's Turn of the Screw. So it's a ghost story. Turn of the Screw also it's kind of a long novelette, I suppose, novella. That was the basis of Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Bly Manor that was just on Netflix a couple of years ago. But The Innocents scared me stupid. And it's the first time that I had that experience of having watched the film, wanting to go upstairs to pee, getting halfway up the stairs and being very uneasy about what I couldn't see behind me. So instinctively wanting to run up the stairs to get away from it, whatever it was, but not wanting to run up the stairs because I was terrified of what might be lurking around the corner on the landing that I couldn't see. So I couldn't go down and I couldn't go up. And then, when I finally did get into the bathroom, being able to use the men's advantage and pee with my back to the wall, so at the side of the bowl, so that I could control my defensible space. And I'd never forgotten that. Was particularly the moment where Miss Jekyll, I think it is, she's appeared as a ghost and she's being watched by Deborah Carr, stars in the movie, and she cried. The ghost cries. She's sitting at a desk in the schoolroom. When she's gone, she's left a real tear on the child's slate, and that stayed with me. And when I saw the film again later, when I was all grown up, I was delighted to realize that it's a brilliant movie. It's a magnificent piece of movie making. Recommend it to anybody. It's made in black and white. The Innocents, 1962. That's the answer to that question. Cosmic Cringe, 781. There, I said your name again.
What about you, Steve? Movies?
Oh, when it comes to the paranormal, I'd definitely say The Entity. Of course, Ghostbusters. It's amazing. Let's just face it. It's absolutely phenomenal, and it has some basis to Dan Aykroyd being deeply involved in the field. Brought a lot of the verbiage and even some of the methodology to it. But ghosts. Poltergeist. The way they investigate it is pretty close to real life. You're very slow moving, very thought out. You have a center command with your base there, and even more data collection than running around with gadgets. And the innkeepers is pretty cool in terms of how they're investigating the paranormal, just sitting down quiet. She's doing real-time analysis, taking notes, and that's a newer movie, last Ty West movie, last couple of years.
Horror comedy, right? Am I wrong in that, or
I don't remember much. I don't remember much of comedy.
Okay,
It's the same filmmaker of House of the Devil. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty cool. It's a newer film. Maybe I could be making it up, but maybe 5 or 6 years old, or maybe a little longer. But in terms of in history, paranormal, those are the ones that sort of stick with me as kind of cool. The Entity, most certainly, and but there are so many fun ones. The Frighteners, that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of great movies about the paranormal out there.
Even though I know that the story of Amityville is complete bullshit, I love that movie so much. And it still scares the shit out of me too. Yeah. No, it's, you know what it is? It's Jodie. When what's her face opens the door and the rocking chair is going and it just stops.
Yes.
Yeah, that's spooky
Yeah.
as hell.
No,
Love it
is.
though. And Changeling, someone mentioned the Changeling. That is
Changelings
amazing.
is
George C.
good.
Scott,
Ooh,
you know that one, yeah.
Yeah,
The ball
yeah,
down
of
the stairs.
course.
Yeah.
the ball down the stairs.
And this book series, in case no one's seen my shirt today.
Oh, scary stories. Yeah.
Tell in the dark.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to tell everyone where and when they can see your various shows and videos?
Yeah. New Ghost Hunters episodes, Halloween. They You can see. Really, we're at Missouri State Penitentiary. Super fun. Amy and Adam and Dustin join us on this one. For those who are familiar with our work, they'll know who they are, and that's on Discovery Plus. And then you'll have another bunch of episodes that start early in the new year, and we're going to keep plugging away. And yeah, October 31st, Halloween, Discovery Plus, Ghost Hunters.
The House in Between is it's on Amazon Video. That's where I found it.
Yeah, House in Between. You can.
I paid for it.
Oh man, you should have told me. I would have sent you a link. Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, you can see that anywhere you watch movies. Honestly, it's on all the platforms. You can get it at Best Buy, Walmart, on your shelves if you want a physical copy. But anywhere you watch movies, you'll be able to find that. iTunes, Amazon, Tubi, all of those places.
Is that something you'd want to explore again? Because I wondered whether it was maybe to some extent a sense of frustration with the short form of psychic investigation, that to be able to let the narrative breathe and tell the story over 90 minutes rather than 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah, it was actually a much, you're right. You could actually really breathe more and put a lot more, focus on different things that you necessarily wouldn't be able to otherwise. I will say with a documentary, it's a much laborious process. And I don't mean that but I mean that in terms of time. It took close to 2 years, through all of the research and all that. And your average TV show just takes a few months, from filming, editing, all of that. And so I think it would be, a process that you couldn't really do more than once or twice a year. But I would love to, have my eyes on some other projects and stories to tell, in that world. And with the success of The House in Between, luckily could have some outlets for them. So I'm still interested in telling more long form stories like that. And it's a great way to investigate it, but in the documentary world, it can't just be, let's investigate this place because it's haunted. There needs to be a real human connection there. There needs to be humility and a story to tell. Exactly. So, I definitely have to consider all of that. I don't want to just put a documentary out about a place because it's haunted. That's a TV show. Documentary needs a good 2 year of gestation and fact checking and all that.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, maybe we can do a ghost hunt together again sometime.
Oh yeah. Listen, that's right in my wheelhouse. Anytime.
Definitely. Yeah. Let us know if you're in the area, or, we've run into each other at conventions and stuff. I mean, sometimes that's actually how we got to Waverly. We were doing a convention down that way, and contacted the owners, and they, welcomed us in. And
Rolling Hills as well.
Rolling Hills as well. She came to Doug's table and
said, hey, do you want to come visit?
I own a haunted asylum. I'm like, well,
you
duh. So
awesome.
I have to admit, we're very spoiled in that respect. We get invitations to places, and we get treated very well and get little private tours. That's pretty cool. Won't lie about that. That's a nice perk.
Happy to have that one.
But so everybody go see Steve's shows and watch his documentary, and reminding everyone that on actually tomorrow we are on with our friend Perry Shell, the t-shirt guy. He's known as, he's an artist, a t-shirt collector, musician. T-shirt Showtime on Instagram. We'll be talking about t-shirts and showing his Hellraiser shirts that are who come to
Apparently
find
now
out are worth a lot of money,
seem to be worth money.
that he was lining the walls of his studio with to deaden the sound. And I
I
said,
didn't
take the
know they were
friggin'.
just T-shirts that I was never going to wear,
Yeah.
so I nailed them to the wall.
So we'll be talking about t-shirts, because I can't stop buying t-shirts and I have way too many t-shirts. And Saturday, the Grim
So
Life,
that's
that's
6 o'clock
tomorrow,
Eastern.
6 o'clock, we're on t-shirt time with Perry Shell. And Saturday.
Is that like is it its own time zone? T-shirt time? Like
no, that's the name of the show. But it's on Instagram. And Saturday, the Grim Life
what's happening on
Collective
Saturday?
is showing the episode with you and me at the Buffalo Bill House.
Oh, is that on? Oh,
That's on Saturday.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
We got to go to the Buffalo
So
Bill
how
House
do
from
people-
Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
So Grim Life Collective on YouTube.
Right.
You can catch it there and watch us walking around the Buffalo Bill House.
Okay.
And our top, what are we calling these people, David, that give the most subs, the most sub givers?
Top
What are they called? Very
donors?
generous people.
Yeah.
Donors. Top donor for tonight.
It looks like
Sounds very professional.
Zakiro just overtook Koala.
Yeah,
with
they're
22.
taking it out there for a while.
Nice.
And they're doling it out. So
Yeah, so you got about 30 seconds left. You guys want
While they're slugging about it, I want to show off
Oh, yeah.
my Hellraiser toy. No,
It's
it's
not a Hellraiser toy.
Halloween is but it begins with H. We need to turn the lights down a little bit to make this. Can we do
to,
that?
I can do that.
I bought this. It's not so much these days, but it used to be always the best shopping day of the year, which is November the 1st, when all the Halloween stuff is 50% off.
It's
And I
probably
bought this in Target. What, 3-4 years ago?
It's a good while ago. I'd hold it away from the microphone though, because it's
You
pretty
think?
loud. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's very cool. I don't know whether people can see detail. It's a windmill that is on fire, and here's everything's reflecting off the glass. You can see Boris here, Boris Karloff as the monster in front of the burning mill.
Go
And
on.
I've never changed the batteries in this thing either, and it does this.
Oh my God, it's so awesome.
Very cool. And it has a sensor too, so if you walk past
Motion
it,
sensor.
it'll go
So
off.
I don't use that because it drives me mad after a while.
That is super cool.
So there you go. Actually, Michael's right now has everything 50 to 60% off. I bought some stuff today.
Shameless advertising.
Yes,
This show is not brought to you by Michaels,
but it should be.
that's the best Halloween toy I've ever bought. It's
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful.
But anyway,
It smells like art.
Steve,
oh, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Seeing you again and talking to you, and
Yes.
that would be real cool if we could hang out in a haunted place together one of these days. So
All right.
let's make
I'm
that
into
Thanks
it.
so much. Happy ghost hunting.
Thank you
Yes.
for having me. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, take care,
Pleasure.
Steve.
Thanks again,
Stay
Steve.
safe. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
And good night, everybody. It'll be
I guess
just us next week.
open forum next week. Yes. So
Just us.
thank you again for everyone who's gifted subs, and
Yes.
who won in the end? is it-
Zakiro Fox.
Zakiro Fox. Thank you, but thank you to everybody else.
To Koala
Koala.
again and Sweet Skittles.
Fantastic.
Yes.
It is appreciated, and you know it helps to keep us doing what we're doing.
Yes. So see everybody
cool.
next week.
We will see you next week. Peace and pain.
Bye.